You are watching TypeScript Master Class, and in this series, we are diving deep into TypeScript and its related concepts. And today, we are starting with the fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming paradigm. So, whether you are new to OOP or just looking to solidify your current understanding, or if you want to prepare for an interview, this video is going to break everything down step by step. So, why should we even care about learning object-oriented programming, or OOP for short? So OOP is one of the most powerful ways to structure our code because it allows us to create reusable, maintainable and scalable system. And not only that, but because of this, it is backbone of many modern framework and languages. Say for example, let's take a look at popular framework like NestJS. Not to confuse with Next.js, N-E-X-T. No, that is not what I'm talking about NestJS, N-E-S-T, which is a framework that is used to build backend system with Node.js, which heavily use OOP principle, and on top of that, it uses concepts like decorators. In Nest.js, everything revolves around classes and decorators, which helps to define metadata and handle cross-cutting corners, which makes building server-side application easy, maintainable and scalable. Now, to help you along, I have included a link to the base code on top of which we will start working. You will find the link in the description below. This will act as our starting point. So make sure to download it and get set up it in your system. And to use that, you should have Node.js installed, and to use this project, because this is a TypeScript project, you should have TypeScript installed globally in your system. And also for your reference, the end code, the code that we will end up writing at the end of this video, that link also you will find in the description box below. So if you have any confusion, feel free to check that code also. So what are we going to learn in this section? So we'll deep dive into classes, objects, inheritance, the concepts around access modifier, that is public, private and protected, and why we need them and what is the difference between them. Then we'll learn what is abstract class, what is static class. Then interestingly, from the concept of static class, we will dive into a design pattern called as singleton design pattern, and on top of that we will solve a very interesting interview question. So I hope you are excited about this course. So let's roll the intro and jump into the code. So till now, what I have done in this OOP folder, I have created a department.ts file and an index.ts file. So in department.ts, we will write our class, and in index.ts, we will use those class, do a console log and see the behavior. So for now, what I will do in index.ts, I will just add a console.log. So I will say hello. Then I will take up a terminal. Here, what I will do, I will say npx nodemon and src oop, then index.ts. And before running this one, what I will do, I will add a console.clear statement here at the top of this file, so that every time the code runs, it will clean up the console and then display, so that our console will not be cluttered and we'll be able to clearly see the result. So I will run this one. So we get hello, and it of course cleared the screen. Then let us start writing some object-oriented programming. So the concept of object-oriented programming revolves around classes and objects. So class is a blueprint where we define instance member, methods, getters, setters, constructor, and then we create the object of this, or instantiate an object from a class which will have all those properties. So to start with, we will write a simple class. I will say export. Okay, export is just the TypeScript concept. So that I can export this into index.ts. So the class starts with the class keyword, then it has a name. So I will name it as department and do curly braces. So this is a very basic class. So I will come here, I will import it. So import, I'll say department from /department. And then what I will do, I will create a object. So how do I create an object? So I will say const dept, or short for department, equals to new department and parenthesis. So this new keyword is important. That's how you create instance of the class with the new keyword. So I'll save this one, and this, instead of hello, I will log the department. So if we see, it has logged this department. Then, so what are we going to do with this class? So we'll learn one by one concept. So the first concept that I want to introduce is a constructor. And how do we write a constructor? We use the keyword constructor, and it is a function. So when is this constructor called? Every time we create a new instance of the class, this constructor method will be called. So here what I will do, I'll add a console.log. So it will say creating class, okay, and ... So what I will do here, if you see the log, it is saying creating class, and after that we are getting this console log. So every time you create a new department object, this constructor will be called. Now can I pass parameters to the constructor? Yes, I can pass parameters also. So what I can say, let me pass the department name. This is of type string. Then what I can say, creating class, and I will append department name. Or instead of creating class, let us call it creating department. Now if you see, it is throwing error, right? Why it is throwing error? Now it is expecting one constructor argument. Okay, so where do we pass the constructor argument? Here in this bracket. So it is expecting one argument. So I will say IT department. Now it will work. So it is saying creating department IT, then this department console log has happened. So this is the constructor. Can it take multiple parameters? Yes, it can take multiple parameters. Can we do constructor overloading? So in TypeScript, constructor overloading is not allowed. Okay, so we cannot have multiple constructor with different set of parameters. Okay, constructor overloading is not allowed. Then let us check what is a class property. So this class is going to do something, right? And for that we need to initialize some variables that belongs to only this class. So these are called class properties. And how do we define them? So we define them with their name and their type. Then if you see, we are getting a squiggly here, which is saying property name has no initializer and is not definitely assigned in constructor. So what it is saying, either what we have to do, we have to assign a value here like this, or we have to assign it in the constructor. And how do we access this variable? We have to use the keyword this. Okay, so this dot name equals to department name. So like this we create class property. Now if you see this name, I'll come here in this department, and if I do department dot name, and I can modify this if I want. So I can name it as finance. So now all of a sudden this IT department has become finance department, right? So this is not something that I usually want. Of course, it depends on the use case that you are implementing, but it is not generally a good practice for someone who is using this class to be able to change its behavior. So for this, what we will do, we have a concept called as access modifiers, which is public, private, and there is one more, protected, that also we'll see. So what is the meaning of public? So by default, if I do not assign anything, it is public. So a public modifier or a public access modifier or a variable or a class member with public access modifier can be accessed from outside of the class or directly with the object. We can access them. If we don't want that to happen, what we have to do, we have to change it to private. That means only functions or methods that are inside this class can access this one. Others outside this class, they cannot access. So if I save this one, we'll immediately get error. So what it is saying, it is giving squiggly here, property name is private and only accessible within the class, right? So here I can no longer directly access the class property, that is name. Then there is a convention for private methods. We should use underscore. So this is a convention, not a rule. So even if you don't follow, compiler will not throw error, but this is a convention. Now, why do we follow this convention? So I'll introduce you to the concept of getter and setter. Okay. So what is a getter and setter? So now if you see this name, we cannot use it outside of the class. So what if I want to read the department name? I don't want to modify it, but I just want to read it. So for that, if I say department, I'm not getting any suggestion here, right? So even if I do department.name, it will give me this squiggly line. But I should be able to read the name here, right? So for this, what we do, we create something called as a getter and setter. And usually the name is same as that of the property name. So I'll say get name and function body, which will return this dot underscore name. Now if you see, this is the reason why we use this kind of underscore. Now if I have not used this underscore, and if I have kept this as name, here also there is a variable that is called as name, and here also there is a variable that is called as name. So it says duplicate identifier name. So for this reason, as a convention, we use underscore name just to keep everything clean. Of course, if we want, we can change it to department name like this. There is no harm on this. So if I want, I can do this also, right? So, but this kind of create confusion. Okay, why is name returning department name? Okay, it could be the name of the chairperson or name of the HOD of this department, right? It is a department name or name of the head of this department. We are not sure, right? So for this, we use this kind of convention. So keep the name similar as much as possible, but the only difference being an underscore. Now, if you see, I have given a specific way for someone just to read the value. So now if you see in this department, I can say name. Now it will not throw error. Why? Because this is just a getter. Here, if I want, I cannot assign a value. So department.name equals to finance. This I cannot do. Why? Because this is just a getter. So this will throw error. On the contrary, if this was public, can I do this? So of course I have to change this with underscore name, but I'll be able to update this, right? So this is not what something I want. I don't want my class properties to be modified directly. So I'll keep this as private. Now if I want, can I write a setter for this one? Set name, and we will take the name. So I will say department name of string. So what this will do, this dot underscore name equals to department name. Now I will be able to set it. Now this is what I am doing. I am writing in a controlled environment. Okay, if this was public, anybody can write anything, but since I am giving a setter, I will be able to keep a track of this one. So say for example, I can write a console log or write it to the database that okay, name has been updated, right? Whereas if somebody is able to update name like this, will not have track what has happened. If I want, here I can write a track. Here I can write a console log or some kind of log that gives me what has happened with the name, where it was updated, who updated this one, right? So this is what is called as controlling the behavior of this particular underscore name. So if I want, I can have a getter. If I don't want, I will not have a getter. If I want to have a setter, I'll have. If not, I can remove this one. So in my case, I don't want to have a setter. Okay, because this is not something that I want someone to be able to update the name. If they want, they'll just get the name. Then can I have one more variable to this one? So let me add another private underscore count, and this will be a number, right? Now also it is doing the same complaint that it is declared, which is saying count has no initializer and is not assigned in constructor. So what can I do? Let me take one more variable. So I'll say department count, which is of type number. Then what I will do, this dot count equals to department count. So that means how many people are there in this department. Okay, and I can remove this console log, right? So now you have understood that when we create the new instance, this constructor will run, so no need to have the console log. Then so we already have a count, so can I write a getter and setter for this count? So name of a department cannot be updated, but we should be able to update the count. Okay, because count will keep on changing, right? When new people join the department, if somebody is leaving the department, so the count will increase and decrease accordingly, right? So we should be able to get and set count. So I'll say get count, and what this will return, this will return this dot underscore count. And can I write a setter for this one? So I'll say set count, then count value, which is of type number, and this dot underscore count equals to count value. Simple. I will save this one, and let us see what is the problem here. So now I cannot do department dot name, and here if you see, department is now expecting 2 arguments. So I'll say 50. IT department has 50 count. So now all error is cleaned, and I'm getting department dot name. Then what about the getter and setter? So I will say console, I will say console dot log department dot count. So if I save this one, we will see 50 and department name is IT. Now if I do department dot count equals to 80. So how this is happening? This is happening because of the setter that we have added. Okay, then after this, if I do department dot count, is it going to increase? Right, so it will of course increase. So first log says 50, second log says 80, and we have the department name. So this is the concept of getter and setter. So we have the constructor. This is one concept. These are the class members. These are the class properties. Okay, these are getter and setters. Now, is it enough just to have getter and setter? No, right? We should be able to implement some functionality to this class. So for that, what we write? We write class methods. So for this, we write methods. Let us write a method to display the department information. So I will say display information. So what this will do? This will just do a console.log. What this will log? I will write it in backticks. This is dollar, then this dot name. So what this will do? This is IT, and we'll say department and has dollar braces and this dot count people. So this will display the name and count of the. Then I will come to index.ts, and here what I will say department dot display information. So when I run this one, it will say this is IT department and has 80 people, right? So this is called as a class method. So can I write one more method? Let us write one more method. This will increment the count. So what I will say increment count, and so this will be added count of type number, then this dot count equals to this dot count plus added count. So this will increment the count of the department. So how to use this one? So here what I will do, department dot increment count, and I will say increment it by 20. So what is the current department count? It is 80. And after this, if I say department dot display information, what value we will get? Of course, we will get the increment count. Okay, so initially it was 80, then it was increased to 100. So if you see, we have private and public here in this properties. Is it possible to have it in the methods? Yes. So if I do not add any access modifier, it is public by default. But if I add a private, right, this is also possible, then you can no longer use it outside of this class. That means the public private is also applicable to the class methods. What I will do, I'll revert this one. So if you ask, then what is the role of having private function if I cannot use it outside of the class? So private functions are those functions that are internally used by the public function which I don't want to expose it to the outside world. It could be going to the database and fetch some value that I want only to be inside the class. So say for example, there is a employee and I want to get the employee ID. So I'll write a method, say for example, get employee ID. Now that get employee ID function will be public, but it might internally use another function which connects to the database and fetches the employee information. So that helper method will be private. That helper method, I don't directly want to expose it outside the world, but internally I want to write a separate function. So in this case, it will be a private function. Private function will be used by other public function to do their job, but necessarily not needed outside of the class. So let me quickly save this one. Okay, now everything is working. So this is department. Okay, and here we are passing the department name and department count. Okay, now we'll learn about next concept, that is inheritance. That means we create a class, but we don't have to write everything from scratch, but it will inherit from another class. That means it will inherit all its getters, setters, functions, constructor, methods, everything from its parent class. So here we have this class department. Okay, so what I will do, I will minimize this one, then I'll create another class. So I'll say export class, I'll say IT department. Now do I have to write everything again from scratch, that is department name, department count, getters and setters? No, right? So what I can do, I can say extends. Okay, extends department. That means IT department extends from department. That means it will have access to all methods, getters and setters that we have defined in department. Okay, so the only difference is IT department is a more specialized class compared to department. If you see here, instead of having department, what I can do, I'll remove all of this, and here instead of department I will import IT department. Now I'll say const IT dept equals to new IT department. Now if you see, it is also expecting two arguments, department name and the department count. Okay, now since this is already an IT department, do I need to pass ID and say 70? So this is redundant, right? So it is already an IT department and I am still passing IT as a department name. So how to solve this one? So for this I will write my constructor. Okay, this constructor will not take two arguments, but instead it will take one argument, the count. Okay, so I will say dept count of type number. Now what I should do in this constructor, now if you see, this IT department extends from department, right? And if you see, the department constructor expects two arguments. So if I have to extend all the properties of department, I should pass the department constructor its necessary parameters, right? Otherwise it will not be able to properly inherit from department. So if you see, what is the solution for this one? So constructor derived class must contain a super call. So by doing a super function call like this, I will be able to call the constructor of department. So this is the constructor of IT department, and this is extending from department, and this constructor expects two arguments. So how to pass the parameters to your parent class constructor? That is through the super function. Okay, so this is nothing but constructor of department. So it is expecting two parameters. One is the department name. So this is IT department, so I can hard code it as IT here. And what is the other thing? So it is department count, right? Now if you see here, it is saying it is expecting only one argument, that is count. What I am doing, I am saying IT department and making it as 70. Can I do IT department dot display information? Yes, right? So if you see, this is IT department and has 70 people. So from where this display information function is coming, we have not added it to IT department, right? But where we have added it to the parent class, that is department. So that's how we are able to use this display information, because IT department inherits from the parent class, that is department, and everything here is accessible. So the department class gave us a base. Now if we want, can we extend on top of this one? So here I want to have a department HOD. So I'll say private underscore HOD of type string. Then here in the constructor of the derived class, the super should be the first call. If I try to add anything before this one, it will throw error. This is not right. So if you see, it is giving squiggly. Super must be called before accessing this. The super call should be the first line in the constructor. Then I can say this dot HOD equals to something. So in the constructor, let us keep it like this. We will not take the HOD name in the constructor. Instead, what we will do, we will write a function which will set the HOD. So we will say assign HOD, then HOD name, which is of type string. Then what I will do, this dot HOD equals to HOD name. Then I'll come to IT department, and here what I can say, IT department dot assign HOD, and I will say Peter, some name. Okay, we are able to assign HOD to Peter. Now this assign HOD is a specialized method of IT department. So is it going to be available in department? No, right? Because in department we don't have assign HOD function, but in IT department we have this function, because this is what we have added specific to the IT department, not in the department. So this is a particular implementation of IT department class, not the main department class. Now there is a interesting concept here. What I am doing, I am saying display information, but here I am not able to display the HOD name, right? So what can I do? So I already have a display information, and if I want, I can write another display information function here. Now this is called as method overriding. So I am overriding the definition of display information function in the specialized class, that is IT department. I am overriding its definition. So here what can I say? I'll for now copy this one, okay, and I will paste it here, and we are getting a squiggly line here, so I will fix that one. Here what I will say, has count people and is headed by, and we'll say dollar this dot HOD. So we have added our own implementation, or a specific implementation for this class. This function name is coming from this one, this parent class function name. So what essentially we are doing, we are overriding the parent class function to suit the child class implementation needs. Comes the question of this squiggly. Okay, why we are getting squiggly line here? So if you see, when this IT department extended department, it extended all the properties and methods and constructor, but it will not extend private members, be it private functions, be it private methods, or be it private properties. So with private, only and only that class can access, nobody else, not even the extended class, not even the class that is extending the base class. So private, no one can use except that class, and public can be used by anyone, even if it's outside of the class or by the class that is extending the base class. So we should have another access modifier that lies in between. The role of that access modifier should be to act private when it is outside the class, but act as public to the class that is extending it. So there comes the concept of protected access modifier. So protected, what is the meaning of protected? Protected means outside of the class it will still behave as private, but it will behave public to the class that is extending it. So here if you see, now there is no squiggly. So this derived class or this IT department class can now access this dot name and this dot count that is coming from the parent class because it is protected. That means in IT department it will behave as if it is part of this class, just like how it will behave with HOD. So here what we have done, we have overridden the definition of display information. What we will do, we will come here. Then this display information, what it is saying, this is IT department and has 70 people and is headed by Peter, right? We will take another example. So we will take the example of, say for example, finance department. So what I will do, I will minimize this one and we'll take the code example of finance department. Okay, so I'll say export class which extends from department. Now if you see, IT department has an HOD. Here I don't want to have a HOD, here I want to have a chairperson. So I'll say private underscore chairperson, which is of type string. Then constructor, we have already seen this one, so we will say department count, which is of type number. Then I will call the super keyword. Super will pass it as finance department, okay, and count will be department count, and I will mark this dot chairperson equals to empty string. Or if you want, we can pass the chairperson name here itself, because these two are two different class, right? We don't have to follow the same thing that we followed in the IT department. Okay, so here what we will do, let us take the chairperson name in the constructor itself. So I will say chairperson name, which is of type string. Okay, so chair, then I will say this dot chairperson equals to chairperson, that is coming from the parameter. Okay, and it is giving blue squiggly because there is a spelling error. Okay, so I'll say chair, then capital P and capital N, just to follow the camel casing convention, otherwise it will give the blue squiggly. Now can I do display information? So I'll copy from here and paste it here, and here what I will do, instead of headed by, I will say is chaired by this dot underscore chairperson. So this is another implementation of department. So here what can I do, I can say const finance equals to new finance department, and it is taking two parameters, one is the count, one is the chairperson name. So let us call it Sam. Then finance dot display information. So what this will do, this will display the finance department information. So what this is saying, so if you see, this is finance department and has 80 people and is chaired by Sam. So this finance department has some different implementation, IT department has different implementation, but they both are coming from the same department parent. So this is the concept of inheritance. Then we will check what is an abstract class. So if you see this index, it makes sense to have an object of IT department. It makes sense to have object of finance department, right? But does it make sense to have a object of the base department? So what is this base department thing? What is a department? Okay, in a company or in a college, there are IT department or finance department. You know, there is a computer science department, there can be a mechanical department, but what is just a plain department, right? It's nothing, right? This concept doesn't make sense, right? So I should be able to prevent someone from creating object of the base department. So for this, what I should do, I'll come to the base department and I will mark it as abstract. So I will say abstract. Now what will happen if I add an abstract? So I can no longer create object of abstract class, and this class is meant to be inherited. There is no purpose of having this class other than another class extending it. So of course it doesn't make sense to have a object of department class. What we instead want, we have specialized department, that is IT department, finance department, and we can create so many departments, but having a plain department doesn't make sense, right? So I'll mark this as abstract. So now if I try to do const department equals to new department, of course it will throw error. You cannot create an instance of abstract class. So this is the error. So this way I have prevented from someone creating object of a class which I don't want based on my use case. So here my use case is I should be able to have specialized department, but the base generic department should stay intact and the object of this department should not be created. Okay, so for that I will mark the department class as abstract. Now if you see this information, this is a very generic information that is particular to this department class. And if you see this IT department and finance department, they have their own implementation. Now does it make sense for me to have a definition of a display information function inside this class? Because I know for sure that whoever is going to extend department, they are going to provide their own implementation, right? So I should not have the headache of giving a definition in this abstract class. So what I will do, I will mark this function as also abstract. So I'll say abstract display information, and this I'll remove the function body and I'll just give a definition. So what this is abstract display information which won't take any parameters and it won't return anything. Of course, based on your need, if you are defining another function, you can pass the parameters and return type. Okay, now what has happened here is, even though I am not providing a definition, but whoever is extending, they will be forced to provide a definition. So for example, in IT department, if I omit this one, this will immediately throw error. Non-abstract class IT department does not implement inherited abstract member display information from class department. So what this long statement means is the IT department class must implement the definition of display information. Otherwise it will not compile, it will give error. So in the same way how we have the abstract methods, we can have abstract properties, and the specialized class or the class that is inheriting must provide a property with the same name, and we can have the implementation in whatever way we want. So this is called as abstract class, and there we can have abstract methods and abstract properties. The next concept that we will check is a static class. So what is a static class? So till now what we have done, we are creating instance of the class. So a static class is a class in which we can access the static properties directly from the class name. So if you see here, the class name here is finance department. Here if I say dot, I cannot access the assign HOD or display information or count or name like that, right? That is only possible on the instance of the class. Instead of finance department, if I use the finance object, then I'll have all the property, that is count, name, increment, and information. Okay, this is not available on the class but on the object created from the class. On the contrary, static class, what it does, on the class name itself we will have the static properties. We don't have to create instance of the class to have the static property. So what we will do, I'll remove this one and I'll come here and create a new class. I will say export class, I'll say company. So this is the company in which we have all the department. Now it doesn't make sense to create instance of the class company. So here we will have some property that won't change, that is fixed, and we don't want to create object of the company, but directly with that name of the class we should be able to access the properties. So what I will do, I will first create a private property and I will say company name, and I will mark and I will add a value, say for example code with Soumyajeet. Now if you see, this is still now just a normal class that we have added, right? So to mark this as a static member, what I will do, I will say static. I will use the keyword static. Then I will use, just to show, I will use another non-static member. Let us call it as public, and for now I'll call this also as public, just to see the difference. So public, I will say type of string, okay, type of string, and this will be, say for example, LLC. This is not real, just giving an example, okay? So what type of company this is? This is an LLC. So now if I come here and I will do console.log, I will say company, and if I say dot, what value I will get? Company name. Now if you see, company name is static, right? So that's why directly with the class name I'm able to access the static property. But can I access type from the class name itself? No, right? So if I say type, it will throw error, right? Because it doesn't know. So if I have to use type, what I have to do? So I'll revert this one, and what I have to do? Const company equals to new company, and on the object now I'll be able to access the type, right? So static member I can directly access from class name. Non-static member I can access only through the object. Now I will remove these two lines, okay? Then I will mark again this as private and mark this as private. Now I will write a method. Instead of making it public, I'll write a method to get company name and get the type, okay? So I'll say get company name. This should return, what this should return? This dot. Here what I'm getting? Only type, okay? And get company name, so this is just this function name, okay? So if you see here, I'm not getting the company name property. Why I'm not getting? Because to access a static property you must write a static function, okay? So if I mark this as static, then static space, okay, then if you see, I'll get the company name, right? Earlier I was not getting. Why? Because a static function or static method can access static property. So if you see here, company name is private, but here what I can do, get company name is the function or a static function, and to call the static function I can directly use the class name, okay? I don't have to create the class object. And if I have to use this type, I cannot use it in the static function, static method, okay? So I'll say get company type. So this will return this dot type. So this static cannot access this type property, and this non-static method cannot access the static property company. So this is the concept of static class. So if you see the classes like math class, in which you have given functions or say constants like pi, those kind of thing. If you want to create a class, there is no justification for us to create object of that class, okay? These are static, and of course a lot of this depends on the implementation that you want to do based on your use case. Static class or this static property you can access directly with the class name, okay? You don't have to create the object. Now there is one interesting thing. Even though this is a static, there are static properties here, I am still able to create the object of a company type, right? So can I do like this? So const company equals to new company, right? Now in our example, what I will do, I will remove the non-static properties, okay? So this is the class that I have, okay? Now here both the property and method are static, right? And I'll be able to access them directly from the class name. So does this make sense for me to able to create object of the company class? No, right? But I'm still able to use the new keyword on company. So how can I prevent this one? All I have to do is write a constructor, and I can mark this as private. So with a private constructor, I can no longer use the object. I cannot create object of this class. So this will immediately throw error. Okay, so if I have to use the static property and method, I can directly do it from the class name. So there is no justification for me to be able to create object of this class. And how I prevent that one? By marking this constructor as private. Simple, right? So now I can no longer create object of this class. Okay, this is intended to be used directly with the class name, not with the object name. So this is the static class. Now using the static class, there is a concept called as singleton pattern. So here if you see this IT department, I can create multiple classes. This finance also, I can create multiple class. So what is a singleton class then? So if you see classes that deals with database connection or expensive communication, okay, what I want is I should always have one object of the class. I don't want to have multiple objects. But if you see here, IT department, I can create multiple departments. The finance also, I can create multiple departments. That means I can create multiple object of that particular class. Okay, and each object will be different. But on the contrary, there are certain scenarios in which I want to have only one object, one and only one object. So to achieve this, what we do, we write a class in a certain way in which it will always give us the same object instance. So say for example, there is a driver class that you are writing for a particular database connection. Okay, now every time somebody is creating a new object, you don't want to have another connection connecting to the database, because if there are multiple connection, it will overload the database, right? So in this scenario, what you want, even though someone is creating multiple instances, they are internally the same object, so that you don't have multiple connections or anything that is expensive, or any scenario where you don't want to have multiple classes, you follow singleton pattern. Okay, so this is a classic design pattern, and in lot of interview this question is asked. Okay, so here we will learn how to create a singleton class which will always return us the same object. Just for the purpose, let us create another finance. Okay, const finance equals to, or I'll say const finance 2 equals to new finance department. Okay, and this has 90 members and is headed by say John. Okay, now if I compare these two classes, so console.log is finance equals to finance 2. No, right? Because these two are two different classes. They point to different memory location. Okay, so these two are never going to be same. With a singleton class, every time I create a new object, instead of creating a real new object in memory, it will return me the same existing object. So with that singleton pattern, if I compare two different object instance, they should return the same object and the comparison value should be true. Okay, so that is the base criteria. So here I will come and say, for example, I will use the name say legal. So export class legal. Okay, so every time a legal instance is created, it should always point it to the same object. Now how to achieve this kind of class? So for this, first thing that I need is to prevent someone from using the new keyword, because if they are able to create new object from the new keyword, it will always give them new object. So for that, what I will do, I will mark the constructor as private. So now we will come here and here we will say const legal 1 equals to new legal. This they cannot do. If somebody is able to do this, that means it will always be new object. So first thing is I should be able to prevent this from happening, and how I have achieved, marking this as a private constructor. But now if they cannot use the new keyword, then how they will create the instance? So for that I will give them a method which will give them the new instance of the class. So I will say public get instance. Now if we are not able to create object, that means to call the get instance, I should be able to call it with the class name, right? So for that, what I should do, I should mark this as static. So instead of using the new keyword, what they can do legal dot get instance. So this will give them the instance instead of the new keyword. So now this gives me control of how many class instance I will create. Now what this should do, so if I do like this, I will say return new legal. So this will always give them the new object. So this is same as doing const legal equals to new legal, right? But what I'm doing is I'm channelizing it through the method. But this is not what I want, right? I want to restrict it to only one class. So for that, what I will do, I'll create a static property called as instance object. Okay, instance object. And what is this is of type? This is of type legal. So I'm creating an instance in which I'm going to store a new instance of this particular class. So instance object is of type legal. Then when somebody is saying get instance for the first time, what will be the value of this instance object? It will be undefined, right? So if instance object equals to undefined, okay, what I will do, I'll define it. So instance object equals to new legal, right? And I will return instance object. But if this is not the case, I will not create the new instance, but I will simply return this dot instance object, right? So what I'm doing, I'm checking if I already have an instance of this particular class, return it. Okay, if I don't have, create a new one, store it, and then return that one. Okay, so now what has happened, this get instance method, when it is called for the first time, okay, it will create the new instance with this new keyword that will be returned. But next time when I call this one, this if validation will fail and it will return me this instance. This instance contains what? This copy. Okay, so it will always point to the same object, right? So here what I can say, const legal 2 equals to legal dot get instance. Now if I do a comparison, console.log legal 1 equals to legal 2, what do you think will be the result? Of course it will be true, right? Because they are the same object instance. Okay, so this is called as a singleton design pattern. Every time you create a new instance, you will get the same object. And for example, it is a database driver class, it is a network connection class. Even if by mistake you are creating second instance, you will still get the same object which is pointing to the same particular connection. It will not open a new connection. So this is the concept of a singleton class. And there is a interesting interview question, that is a modification of the singleton design pattern. Okay, so the question is, can you design a class in such a way that only, say for example, 5 objects will be created, but if you try to create the 6th object, it should throw error? That is the question. How can you design a class in which you can create only n number of objects, and after that n number of objects it should throw error, it should not allow you to create more classes? Okay, so this is an interview question. Let us try to solve this one. And what I recommend is, before seeing my solution, you try it on your own. You have to use the concept of the singleton pattern, but modify it a little bit to suit this need. Okay, so singleton pattern will give you one object. What we want, we should only give 5 objects. After that, throw error. Okay, so try this and then come back to check my solution and see how accurate you are able to write the solution. So I will come, and so what I will do, I will create a class, export class, say for example marketing. Okay, since I am using the department IT, finance, legal, just I am writing marketing as the class name. Okay, Then first thing what I need, I should be able to prevent the object creation from the new keyword. Okay, so for that what I will do, I will mark the constructor as private. Now if constructor is private, I should give them a method to get the instance, and that method will be called directly from the class name. So it should be a static method, we have already seen. So I will say public static get instance. Now we should have the instance property. So I'll say static, okay, which will be of type marketing, and I'll correct the spelling here. Then I should be able to keep track of how many objects are created. So for that I'll introduce two more variables. First is private. Of course it should be private, because if somebody else is able to access this, they can create multiple objects by updating this value, right? I don't want someone to update this value, so I'll keep it as private. Okay, and this is going to be used inside this static method, so I will mark this as static. Okay, and I will say max instance count, and this is going to be say 5. Then I will say private static, I'll say current count, I'll say current count is 0. In my example, I'm taking 5, so only 5 objects we can create, not more than that. So when we are coming into get instance, what I have to do first? So this dot current object plus plus. Okay, so I'll increment the counter. Okay, so when somebody is calling get instance once, counter will be increased. If it is called another time, this counter will increase again. Then I will check if this dot current counter is less than equals to this dot max instance count, then return new marketing object. And if the counter has increased the limit, what we will do, we will say in the else condition throw new error. We can give a message, so you cannot create more instances. So this is the implementation. Okay, so we have created a static method called get instance. Here we are doing validation. Okay, if the current count is less than the max count, then keep on creating new object. If this count has reached the limit, that means when this condition will fail, it will throw this error. So we will save. Then we will come here, and since this is throwing error, we will wrap it in a try catch block, and in catch block we will add a console error dot message. Okay, then, and it's giving squiggly, okay, because it doesn't know what is the type of this error, so I'll mark it as any. Okay, then what I will do, I will say const m1, okay, equals to marketing dot get instance. Then similarly what I will do, I'll repeat it for 5 times. Now after this, what I will do, I will add a log statement which will say success. So that means there is no exception here. Okay, so if you see, we are getting success. Why? Because there are only 5 objects. Now if I try to create the 6th object, m6 equals to marketing dot get instance, and as soon as I save this one, what has happened? If you see, we are getting this error, you cannot create more instance. So this is a nice interview question, and if somebody asks you this question, I think you will be able to answer it. And this is basically a derivation of the singleton design pattern. Okay, and this is it for the object oriented programming in TypeScript. I have given you all the concepts that are there, and I really hope that you have learned many things from this video. And if you like this video, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, share it with your friends, and share your valuable thoughts in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video.